everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and I like to talk about books, and today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in the month of August. Let's waste no time and jump right on into it. I read 18 books this month, so this could be a long one if I waste a lot of time. So we're going to try to move quickly and go by categories like I usually do of different types of genres. So first I'll start with my literary / contemporary stack of books. I read Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel this month. This is a book that I've heard a lot of people talk about. Many people say this is their favorite book, and I did not know anything about it. I thought it had a beautiful cover. I had no idea it was a post-apocalyptic story. So that really surprised me. I also found out right before I started reading it that there was something to do with Shakespeare in here. I had no idea what to expect with that either. I've never really read a Shakespeare related book. But basically, Station 11 is about a group of people who are living in, I guess, the United States after it has been decimated by this virus that broke out. So horrifying to read in the midst of a global pandemic. Would not recommend reading this right now because it is very real. There's a scene where this one guy is like raiding the grocery store right when the virus is starting to break out, and he's like pushing 7 carts full of things, and I was just having flashbacks to me 5 months ago when all this began, or maybe 6 months ago. Who even knows how long it's been at this point? But basically this follows several different people and several different points in time. The way Shakespeare becomes part of it is there's this troupe of actors who go around the country and perform Shakespeare plays, and that is kind of the thing that's like giving them motivation to keep living. There's a quote in here. They're called the Traveling Symphony, and they have a caravan that they drive around, and on the caravan it says, "Because survival is insufficient." And that just hit me real hard because I feel that. I feel those vibes of, you know, when the world around you is crashing down and nothing is the same as it was, and you don't have any of your systems in place that you used to. And obviously the world in this is much more dramatic than our current climate. I mean, most of our world is still thankfully operating at a pretty great capacity today, but in this world they really lost a lot, and that Shakespeare troupe really keeps them going and gives them something to live for, which I thought was really nice. This book wanders around quite a bit in time and location and character. I thought the writing was excellent. I thought the character building was excellent. Maybe the one thing that was a little weak for me was just the general plot of where this book takes you. Because like I said, it meanders through times and characters, and yes, they're connected, but I didn't necessarily come away with anything in particular from this book. I just had a good time reading it. So it was more about the journey than the destination, honestly, for this, which is kind of nice to have sometimes. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I would recommend it. Also, I'm gonna do something different this month and rank these books from favorite to least favorite on my bookshelf. I've cleared out some space. Hopefully the bookshelf doesn't topple down on me because it is not secured to the wall, and that is my greatest fear. But you know, it'll be on video and live in perpetuity if it does happen. Since this is the first book, I'll just put it right, you know, there. And it'll probably fall over pretty soon. Next, we have Sleepwalking by Meg Wolitzer. If you can see my tabs, you can probably figure out that I enjoyed this book quite a bit. This is the first book that I've like tried tabbing with to see if I enjoyed it, and I don't hate it. We'll see if it continues in my future though. So Sleepwalking is a book about this group of college girls who call themselves the Death Girls. Yeah, they call themselves the Death Girls. So each of these Death Girls are obsessed with a different poet. One's obsessed with Sylvia Plath, one's obsessed with Anne Sexton, and then one's obsessed with this poet named Lucy Asher, which is actually a fictional poet that was created for this story. And our main character is the one that's obsessed with Lucy Asher. So all these girls like take on the personality of these poets. They dress like them, they act like them, they talk like them, they read their poems, they try to emulate them. But anyway, basically our main character Claire is super obsessed with this poet. She starts having this like affair with this guy, like sleeping with him a little bit. She's just really lost in life, and the other Death Girls recommend to her that she does something to try to experience her poet's life. One of them said that she went to the house where that poet grew up and like sat on the side of the street and saw the poet's mom like drive in her groceries and get out of the car, and she said that just made her feel so connected and like healed her. They recommend that Claire do something like that to get close with this Lucy Asher poet. Lucy Asher is like famous for having killed herself. Her collection of poetry actually got published after she died, and her parents did it. But anyway, long story short, Claire ends up going to Lucy Asher's parents' house and volunteering to be like their cleaning lady, and she ends up moving in and living there and becoming really obsessed. It goes into some dark places. I don't really know how I feel about this book. It is a weird little book. It is full of grief. It made me feel depressed, honestly. I mean, it's like heavy to read. So I don't know how I feel about it, but something in it resonated with me. I don't have the most well thought out feelings about this. I read this because Kat from Paperback Dreams loves this book. Obviously, I read everything that Kat loves, so I gave this a try, and I'm glad I read it to see what it's like and to see what Meg Wolitzer's writing is like. I would read more from Meg Wolitzer. I don't think I would recommend this book to people, though, because it's so heavy. I don't know. I didn't come away feeling any reason to recommend it to people, but I gave it 4 stars. So if we're gonna do this side as least favorite to favorite, I'm gonna definitely put this on this side of Station 11. Next up, I read Luster by Raven Leilani. This is a new book that just came out a couple months ago, maybe even in August actually. It's pretty new. Did this come out in August? Maybe. This is a story about a woman who starts having this affair with a married man, and then she sort of infiltrates his marriage. She is a black woman, he is a white man in a marriage with a white woman, and they have adopted a young black girl. So there's a lot of conversations about race going on, but it's like subtle. It's a subtle portrayal of race in this book. It's not so much like in your face of telling you what to think and telling you what to believe. This is this author's debut novel, and the writing was exquisite. I mean, it was talent. It was so good. Like the dry humor in this book, the long twisty sentences that just like every word used was just additive in such a powerful way. I mean, I don't know how to explain it if you don't read it for yourself. I just thought this was amazing writing. So I got really sucked into this story for the first 30-50 pages. It is very short, but then I will say the mid portion does drag on quite a bit. It gets very mundane, but there is probably so much to analyze in how racism is in the mundane parts of life. This is a book I could read multiple times and get something new out of it every single time. It was just so good. I want everyone to read this book. I can't believe this is a debut author. I want to read everything this author writes. It's amazing. I gave it 5 stars. It's going to the best side for now. Next is another great book. So that is The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. This is a book I was very excited to read because I just read Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi, and it was one of the most fascinating books that I have ever read in my life. It was just outstanding. So I was super excited to read this new novel from Akwaeke Emezi, and it was 5 stars for me. This book I also tabbed, and you can see I tabbed quite a bit in here. This story follows the death of Vivek Oji, whose body shows up at their family's door, bloodied and like wrapped in a cloth. And so that's how you're introduced to Vivek Oji, and then you're going back in time and kind of learning about their life and their experiences and what was going on. I honestly don't know how much is said in the synopsis about what happens to Vivek Oji and why they're in these specific circumstances. So I don't want to give anything away because I do think everybody needs to read this book. It was very good and very powerful and very heavy, but you know, like good heavy. Like you need to read it heavy. Read this book. So yeah, I gave this 5 stars. I would recommend that everybody read it. I can't wait to read more of Akwaeke Emezi's writing. I still have to read Pet. That is the last one to hit all 3 of their books. So definitely looking forward to checking that one out. And if I have to put this in the ranking system, I would say I enjoyed this more than Luster. Next up, we have My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This is a book I saw going all over Bookstagram, and I knew it was about a teacher-student relationship, but that was kind of it. That's kind of all you need to know. It is about a teacher-student relationship, and it follows the student at different points in their life when they are going through this relationship with this teacher, and then 20 or so years later as they are dealing with the consequences of that. I know this is a very controversial book. Some people believe it's quite harmful and glamorizes teacher-student relationships, pedophilia. I personally felt like this is a good book that can be very useful for survivors of these types of student-teacher like grooming relationships, because the main character Vanessa has a very hard time considering herself as a victim, and it's about her journey of realizing that she is a victim and that this was not a romantic love affair, that this was something where someone preyed on her. So I personally definitely find this hard to read. I do not think this book is for everyone. I do not know if this book is for young girls. I think there is a very specific audience that this can be useful for, and I thought the writing was great. So I gave this book 4 stars. I definitely would read more from this author in the future. I would be careful about who I recommend this book to, I think is my take on it, but I don't think it's entirely bad or entirely good. I think that's definitely a gray area, and I see why there's so much controversy about it. I am interested to hear others' opinions and open to other opinions, obviously. But if I have to put it in my ranking, I would say it goes between Sleepwalking and Station 11 for now. And last in this literary fiction / contemporary pile is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. So I actually have an entire reading vlog dedicated to reading this. I will link you guys up above and down below if you want to check it out to get my full thoughts. But basically I read this for the Krusty Book Club that Chanel from Chanel Time hosts, and I also read it because it is Kat from Paperback Dreams' favorite book, and obviously I read everything that Kat recommends. If you haven't picked that up at this point, what are you doing? I gave this 4 stars. I did enjoy it a lot, but yeah, for my full thoughts, go check out my blog. This one will go right there. Next up, I have 2 randoms, so it's a romance and a graphic novel. So we'll start with the graphic novel. This is Sheets by Brenna Thummler. This is a story about a girl who runs a laundromat. Her mom has passed away, so she's grieving that. She's responsible for running the laundromat since her mom's passing, and her dad is just really going through his own stuff, can't really hold up things very well. She has a little brother she's also taking care of. And then there is this ghost who comes into the laundromat and like wreaks havoc, and then they establish a friendship, and it was outstanding. The artwork in this alone is so freaking beautiful. Like, look at these fall vibes, and there's like the ocean in the background, and it's so beautiful. I love it so much. So this is one I'll definitely be reading over and over and over because I really enjoyed it. There is a sequel coming out soon, so I'm excited to get my hands on that as well. Yeah, if you are new to graphic novels like me, I definitely think this was a very accessible one to get into. I haven't read many graphic novels to this point, as I am just getting started with that format of book, but this one was super easy to get into, a super easy storyline to follow, and it was also just really beautiful and cute and sad and lovely. So I would highly recommend this graphic novel for sure. And it's kind of hard to put on the rating scale because it is so different from book, but I think I would put it in between Luster and The Death of Vivek OG. That just feels right. And the romance I read this month was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I actually read this on audiobook, but I do have a physical copy as well, and I gave it 5 stars. I am recently figuring out what I like in romance and what I don't like in romance, and coming back into my romance roots, honestly. Did not expect 2020 to be a year where I was reading romance books, but here we are. Didn't expect anything that was going on in 2020, so nothing can really surprise me anymore. I really liked this. So this is a story about a man and a woman who are the sister and brother. Is he the brother or is he the best friend? This is about a woman and a man who are like the best maid of honor and the grooms of honor. What do you call these people? It's about a wedding gone wrong. So there's 2 people that are getting married. Her sister and then like his best friend end up going on the honeymoon together because at the wedding, it's like the wife like likes to win giveaways and like free things and sweepstakes, and she's won like this free wedding, free catering, whatever. They end up getting food poisoning or something, so they can't go on the honeymoon. And so then these 2, the sister and the best man, have to go on the honeymoon together in this like beautiful tropical resort, and they hate each other. So it's an enemies to lovers, which I love. It was very cute. I was surprised by some of the pacing of this book. How much time you get at the end of this book that they have come home from the retreat, that kind of surprised me, but I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a fun, good time. That massage scene was spicy, if you know what I'm saying. So once I got to that, I was like, yep, I'm gonna like this book. This one definitely lives up to all the hype that people are giving it. I greatly enjoyed it. And I honestly don't know where to put it, because I enjoyed it more than The Death of Vivek OG, but The Death of Vivek OG is objectively a better book. But did I enjoy it more than Sheets? I don't think so. So I think it goes between Sheets and Luster. Next, we'll move on to thrillers and horrors. So the first book in this category is Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power. I read Wilder Girls a couple months ago during the Queer Lit Readathon and hated it. So why did I read this? Because I'm all about second chances. I definitely liked this book better than Wilder Girls. I gave Wilder Girls a 2-star. I gave this a 3-star. This is a young adult story about this girl who doesn't really know much about her family and her history. Her mother's kind of raised her in a strange way, kind of secluded her. There's lots of things going on about fire that you don't really understand. Like, it's always keep a candle burning. You're like, what's going on? I don't know. But she decides that she wants to learn more about her family. She ends up going to seek out her grandma, who lives on this remote farm in the middle of nowhere, and it's all about the cornfields. So tons of corn in this book, creepy grandma vibes. I mean, like, describing it sounds like something I would really like, but there's just something that I didn't like. It didn't blow me away, and then the ending was really weird, which works sometimes for me, but didn't really work in this. Will I keep reading Rory Power's books? Probably. It's like there's a good idea, but I don't like the execution and the endings. So I'm like, maybe Rory Power will get better for me. I don't know. I like to hold out hope. But yeah, this was a 3-star read. I'm gonna put it at the end of the list, honestly. Next up, we have Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford. This is an interesting concept and a very weird book, and it's short, so I just read it in a day. I don't think I would like truly recommend this book to many people. If you like really weird literature, sure. But ultimately, this kind of panned out to be nothing in the end. It is a story about a girl and her father who are not really human. They're like birthed from the ground, and they're the community healers. So people come to them if they have pain. And when you go to them, they're like magical. They can like reach in your body and fix things. And they bury you in the ground to heal, and then they dig you back up, and then you're better. The format of this book is interesting because there's like interviews from the townsfolk that are interspersed throughout the narrative. So you're like, okay, something has gone wrong at the end. And you're hearing the community's take on them and like what they really think about these people. Basically, like, the main thread is that the girl, who is not really a girl, ends up having an affair with this man who comes to visit, and then from there, like, that turns into a problem because of things I'm not gonna say because I don't want to spoil it. Yeah, in the end, it was like really style over substance. Not a ton going on here. It's a pretty normal story that was blown out of proportion and really flowery writing covering it all up. This is an interesting book. It's very different from most things I read, so I wouldn't like turn my back on this author. I would still explore other things that they do in the future. But yeah, like I said, wouldn't totally recommend this book. If you're like a true fan of just like style over substance, which some people are in it for like the flowery writing, then yeah, I would recommend this book. But overall, I just didn't love it so much. So it's gonna go to the end of the list. I think I gave it 2 stars, maybe 3. Let me check. I gave this 3 stars, but honestly, it's more of a 2-star. Next up is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This was one of my most anticipated novels of the year because I've been trying to get into horror more. This seemed like it was gonna be one of the top horror books of the year. The cover looked really creepy. That was kind of all I needed to know, and I was interested in it. Ultimately, I do think this was a very good story, and I do think what Stephen Graham Jones is doing for the Native community is very powerful and important, but ultimately, I didn't enjoy this book a ton. The writing style was very dense for me. It took me a long time to get into it and to get through it, and kind of just understanding what was happening, just because there's something so dense and gritty about the writing style that was just really difficult for me to digest. But like I said, I did enjoy the story. So it's like a slasher, which is an interesting concept that I haven't been reading a ton, but it is about this group of men who, when they were younger, they went out on the reservation to go elk hunting, and they ended up going on the elders' land and killing elk there that they weren't supposed to, and they also killed more than they needed to. So now in the future, the elk is getting vengeance on these men and coming back and like haunting them and destroying their lives and slashing them. You know, it's a slasher, that's not a spoiler. Really interesting what this book did with the final girl aspect in the end. Definitely was not expecting that, and definitely tons and tons and tons of material in here that I did not fully digest because I'm not an Own Voices reviewer, obviously. This is an Own Voices story by a Native American author. Clearly there's a lot of stuff in here that I'm just not going to understand, that I just need to do more reading and research on to fully understand the impact of some of the things that are in this book and what they truly mean. It's not my new favorite horror book, but I did enjoy it, so ultimately I gave it 3 stars. But if you want to know what I think about Stephen Graham Jones and his writing, stay tuned because I read another book of his and that will be coming up in a short moment, and I love that one. So I'm going to put this right after my Dark Vanessa. Next up, I read No Exit by Taylor Adams. This is a book I've heard people raving about for a long time, but I was like, I don't know, how good could it be? And I've had it for a very long time. I got it as an add-on to my Book of the Month box like maybe a year ago. I mean, it has been a long time and it's just kind of been sitting around. It's one of my new favorite thrillers. It was really good. It's a story about a college woman who is on her way back to see her family. Her mom's like dying in the hospital. It's like Christmas time, it's snowy. She's on the way back to see her family and she can't make it the whole way. There's a snowstorm. She stops at a rest stop. At this rest stop, there's several other people. Turns out one of them has a child in a van, and then she is just stuck there and has to kind of figure out who's got the kid in the van. Is she in danger? Is the kid in the van in danger? What's she gonna do about it? It was so good. It was so fast-paced. I read it all in one day. I love the atmosphere. I love the characters. I love the badass feminist energy in this. It was everything to me. 5 out of 5 stars. Highly recommend. And this is gonna go right here. Whoops, sorry, Mr. Skeleton. I'm using another book to like keep these up, and it is a situation. And last in the stack is The Shadows by Alex North. So I read this because I read The Whisper Man by Alex North earlier this year in January. Loved that a lot. This is Alex North's sophomore novel. It has sort of Slender Man vibes. It's about this group of boys who, when they were younger, had some weird things go on. A kid got killed. Don't want to give any spoilers away. It is following some of them later in the future, mainly one guy, as he goes back to his town where this happened and is grappling with what went on and what is still going on in the community today. So there's an investigation. Are things related? Ow. There's an investigation. Are things related? Are they not? What's going on? Forum boards. Creepy vibes. I thought it was great. I gave this 5 stars. It is one of my favorites of the year, probably. I don't know what it is about Alex North's writing. I don't usually like detective stories. If there's any sort of detective in it, I'm just like, not interested. But something about Alex North's writing, I just really like it. So would highly recommend picking this one up and The Whisper Man. I don't really think I liked one more than the other. I just really liked them both. I think I gave them both 5 stars. So yeah, check out both of them. And I'm going to put this one... I'm going to put it right after the death of Vivek OG. So the remainder of the books that I have are books that I read during Summerween. I have 2 reading blogs for Summerween, part 1 and part 2, so you can go check those out if you want to see my full thoughts on these books and kind of watch me read them and talk about spooky movies, do a book unboxing. A lot happened during that week, so definitely go check out those videos. I will quickly wrap up a couple of those reads. So Mapping the Interior by Stephen Graham Jones. I told you I read another Stephen Graham Jones book later in the month and I loved it. I gave this 5 stars. It was amazing. Long story short, this was definitely a more accessible writing style. It had more of a YA tone, so it was easier to get into. It's also very short. It's only 100 pages, packs a big freaking punch in 100 pages though. It was so good. There's so much that goes on in the story. It's mainly about this 12-year-old boy who one night he thinks he sees his dead father's spirit in his house. And so then he starts out mapping the interior of his house, trying to discover where his father is, but there's so much more going on in this story. I talk more about it in the Summerween reading vlogs, part 2 in particular. So go check that out if you want to hear my full thoughts on this, but definitely 5 stars, really good. And I'm going to put this right after No Exit. Then I read Final Girls by Riley Sager. This is also in Summerween Part 2 reading vlog, so you can see my full thoughts there. But this is the 3rd book that I read from Riley Sager. So first I read Lock Every Door, then I read Home Before Dark, and now this is the 3rd one that I've read, so I only have one left to get all of his completed works under my belt. This is a slasher story also, so I read 2 slashers this month. It follows Final Girls. So there's a group of 3 final girls. One of them kills herself, one of them's your main character, and then the other one goes to visit the main character. There's an investigation that goes on when the one kills herself as to if she actually killed herself or if she was murdered and what's going on. Like I said, I talked about this in my Summerween Part 2 vlog, so you can check that out, but I did really enjoy this one and I gave it 4 stars. I think I'm going to put this one in between the Unhoneymooners and Sheets. Oh, I also forgot to mention I read Martinez and the Moonlit Beginning of Everything. I read that one on audiobook, so that's why I forgot to mention it. But I did really love the premise of that book. It is about a girl whose mom gets deported, and then she is like grieving the loss of her mom. She basically thinks her mom's dead, but also her, like, I'm pretty sure her abuela has been visiting her dead abuela, to tell her that her mom's still alive out there somewhere. So she goes and like lights these candles in the desert, and then basically one day a UFO shows up with her mom on it. So I really love the concept of it. I really love the execution for the first half, and then the second half I got kind of lost and I don't really know what happened, honestly, so I don't want to rate it because I definitely need to like re-listen or like look through the physical copy or something. But yeah, so I don't really have a place to put that on the rating scale, but I do think it was good. I just like need to go circle back and figure out what was going on. Then we have the book that I DNF'd this month. So that is The Boatman's Daughter by Andy Davidson. I read this in part 1 of my Summerween reading vlogs, so you could see why I DNF'd it there and what I did not like about this book, but I will not be picking this back up. It is just not for me. And then last and potentially least, Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. So I don't want to talk about this book a whole bunch. Don't really want to give it more attention than it needs because it has been very harmful to the Native community, and I don't want to support that any more than I have already. But I was a huge Twihard back in the day, really into the Twilight series. It really reinvigorated my love for reading. It really got me into young adult reading. So I definitely wanted to see what Midnight Sun was about. I'm only halfway through. I am going to finish this book, but I'm just going to go ahead and tell you my thoughts on it now rather than waiting until the September wrap up. Like, I just want to get it done and like put it in a box and not really think about it again. Basically, thoughts on this. It is way longer than it needs to be. Nobody needed this many pages of this book. It's just too much, all in general. It's literally just Twilight from Edward's perspective, so you're getting a lot of what you already knew. I mean, you do get his thoughts and his insights, and he reads people's minds, so you get their insights through his mind, which is interesting. And there's like a couple tidbits of extra scenes and things that you find out. There's this particular scene about the first Christmas that Carlisle and Edward spent together that just really warmed my heart for once. Yeah, I basically just don't think this book needed to be written and that it should have been written. I think there's some things in this book that are still not the best and harmful towards the Native community, and it's like, why in 2020 did you need to publish that? You know, like, why didn't you just leave it in the olden days of like your Twilight series and like come out with an apology and, you know, reflect and show that you've learned, instead of coming out with a book that shows you've learned nothing? Not a great look. That's all I have to say about this. I'm gonna finish it just for the sake of finishing it at this point, because I mean, I made it this far and it's huge. That's about it on that. So this is my final ranking from least enjoyment level all the way over to most enjoyment level. So favorites of the month, definitely No Exit by Taylor Adams. Would recommend everyone read that if you like thrillers. It's amazing. Also Mapping the Interior by Stephen Graham Jones. Just really excellent, packed in such a small amount of text. The Death of Vivek Oji, a new release you should definitely check out, as well as The Shadows by Alex North. Not as in love with some of these texts over here, but definitely still liked most of everything. This was Follow Me to Ground was a 3-star rating, but I changed it to 2 stars like on the spot. But other than that, everything is like 3 stars and above. So really not a terrible reading month. I got some really good reads this month. So that is all from me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.